sacred seal of soiled ember engraved with a spiral design, the majesty of the White Tower, stretching to reach the gods, even inspired a secret faith in the invaders, the people of the Erdtree. The spiral tree is a metaphor symbolizing Hornsent's spiritual aspirations of building the White Tower of Enir Ilim, their Erdtree of sorts that Hornsent desired to build to reach divinity, as the spiral motif is the representation of the primordial duality. One of the strands of the spiral symbolizes life, while the other one, death. In the form realm, they were represented with the Hornsent and the Numens. In other words, this was the primeval crucible where all things yearned eternally to converge. The spiral is a normalized crucible current that one day will form a column that stretches to the gods. If you look carefully at the building blocks of Enir Ilim, you will see that instead of irons and bricks, human corpses were used. An initial glance might mistakenly give you the impression that these corpses might be related to the Crucible and the Hornsent. After all, there are horns protruding from the corpses at the Gate of Divinity. However, this is not true, as these are two separate races. There are no horns or any sign of the Crucible over the corpses making up the spiral tower. They are not Hornsent, but if so, who are they? There are statues of two people that are embraced by the spiral in Enir Ilim, which provides a hint to their identity and nature, symbolizing the primordial duality. The people who lived here, the Hornsent, is a primitive but highly spiritual race, imbued with the vestiges of the Crucible. Said to have grown on the human body long ago, Hornsent viewed the Crucible as sacred for the refinement wrought through its evolutionary gifts, most importantly, their tangled horns. Hornsent have horns on their bodies, and their corpses make up the Gate of Divinity because Marika exacted her revenge on her oppressors. However, if you look at the trees in Enir Ilim, you will see distinctly female figures embedded in them. We have seen a similar tree with a female figure in a peaceful village prior. On initial glance, these corpses do not have the long hairs similar to Jar Saints, therefore they must not be related to Marika's people, right? Well, not so fast, as this is where Hornsent's secret recipe for the creation of the sainthood kicks in. Divinity is the only building block that would allow the creation of this spiral white tower. But the question is, how does a Hornsent go about getting closer to divinity? They do so with the jar experiments in Ballarat jail. So let's take a look at one of the first ingredients that they used. The face of the Numen, supposed descendants of denizens of another world, long-lived but seldom born. The Numen are said to have come from outside the lands between, and are in fact of the same stock as Queen Marika herself. The Numens are a matriarchal race made up of shaman women who set foot on the Shadow Realm from another world. Unlike its disjointed nature now, this was a realm which was an organic part of the lands between back in the day. Although the shaman village was Marika's home, it was not her first, for she was not born in the lands between. The Land of Shadow is when the goddess Marika first set foot as the colossal stone coffins of unknown origin seemingly drifted to the southern shore. This was a land where the Hornsent reigned supreme. The omens, misbegottens, fire giants, dragons, the stormhawks, they all were able to carve their own little mark on this world. The Crucible civilization predating the Erdtree not only regarded the vestiges of the Crucible as desirable, but also divine. To be perfectly blunt, Marika and her shamanistic culture setting foot on this land were not welcome. As Needham Knight Leda points out,
Wondering about the Hornsent, are you? True enough. In any other circumstance, he'd be at our throats. Long ago, Queen Marika commanded Sir Messmer to purge the Tower folk, a cleansing by fire. It's no wonder the Hornsent holds the Erdtree in contempt. That aside, man is by nature a creature of conquest, and in this regard, the Tower folk are no different. They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
After seeing the potential of divinity that resides in the Numen race, Hornsent decided to start a ritual involving jars below the BAYLE jail. This is what becomes of the condemned, who get sliced up and stuffed into jars to become saints instead. But before these jars were stored underneath Enir Ilim, they were prepared first in Bani village, a place full of jars. In other words, Hornsent's base of operations, where the greater potentates were chopping up Marika's people before stuffing them into jars. An outsized butcher's cleaver used to dismember human bodies in the making of the great jars stored in the jails. However, Hornsent was not completely devoid of conscience. Knowing the crimes that they commit in the name of divinity, they have used caterpillar masks to strengthen their resolve, a ritual implement of the greater potentates of Bani village, used to ward off thoughts of impurity, doubt, temptation, and other wickedness one is vulnerable to while absorbed in divine ritual. In the whipping hut, there is a Hornsent that gives us a glimpse into their inhumane practices. For pity's sake, your place is in the jar. Nice sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone. If you look carefully at these jar saints, there's a sign on their foreheads, a combination of Marika and Radagon's soreseals, symbolizing how the resulting product of their jar experiments are expected to conjoin the moon and the sun. Hornsent desired to create the alchemical god of the Rebirth, with the focus being on the spiral motif, the conjoinment of life and death to create a true saint. Attire of the shamans who perform their worship at jails, they offer their prayer at the innards of the great jars such that they might be reborn one day into sainthood. I want you to pay attention to this spiral pattern in torches in front of the big jar in BAYLE jail. In the beginning of the video, I have referred to life and death as Crucible and Numen respectively, referring to this divine spiral. It is time to explain exactly what I'm talking about. Crucible is a theme that has a direct connection to life. Not only the Crucible was the period of history where all life was once blended together, but the Crucible represented existence in the beginning of history, the moment when the greater will created the first fracture, birth and soul, life and duality. Divonia, the longest serving of the Crucible Knights, had similar suspicions that the Erdtree's Crucible that she was a part of might just be Primal Crucible's pale imitation at best. It is said that Divonia quested in search of the Crucible's origin and departed from the lands of the Erdtree alone. The Crucible race was currently represented by the Hornsent, imprisoned in the Shadow Realm, but by themselves, these beings were incomplete. Just like Radagon, wanting to be complete his entire life, wanting to merge with his other self, Marika, so did the Hornsent. They were looking for not the conceptual completion, but the spiritual. As a stark contrast, Numens is a race that has a direct connection to death. Shamans, the spiritual path that they walk, constitute what is called the ego death. The same ego death the Carrion Selin pursued along with Luzad and Azur, hoping that becoming one with the stars would be enough to escape the suffering of life, to let go of your individuated consciousness, to make room for a cosmic one. Numens are Marika's people, they're the Shamans, and they're related to Nox and the Carians in the base game with Ranni's Age of Stars, symbolizing the moon. Unlike what you might believe with the Erdtree's golden grace, Marika's people were represented with silver, not gold, with moon, not sun. Similarly, Saint Trina is represented with her silver sword, while Miquella with gold. Miquella wanted to divest all the remaining vestiges of his mother Marika's DNA, so to speak, from his corporeal flesh. Saint Trina was related to the moon, silver, and the Numens. And guess what? The Putrescent Knight guarding Saint Trina represents with his blue flame. Exactly. The very concept of death. Sorcery used by the Putrescent Knight. In an age long past, death was burned by ghost flame. Even the remains of tainted flesh were given equal treatment in death. Coming back to the beginning into the spiral motif, Crucible represented life, while Numens represented death, gold and silver. Combining them resulted in divinity, sainthood. In other words, if the Hornsent desired to create saints with their jar experiments, they needed to conjoin the Numens with the Crucible, death with life. The flesh of Shamans was said to meld harmoniously with others. Haunted by the grotesque practices of his village of birth, he stuffed great pots with all manner of things. If you look carefully at the hospital room in the Shadow Keep, Messmer is doing his best to heal her mother's people from Hornsent's jar experiments, but to no avail, as the other key ingredient that has been added to the jars was completely unprecedented, to say the least. In Ballarat jail, there's a Hornsent ghost who begs for his life to not be stuffed into the jars, the same jars that Marika's people were stuffed into. See, the Hornsent priests had finally realized the final piece of the puzzle. To their surprise, the answer was much closer to home than they initially thought. They needed a part of themselves within the jars to symbolize the life strand of the spiral. They needed to add the vestiges of the Crucible, where all life was once blended together, so that it is in harmony with Numen's death strand, so that it embodies the primordial duality. In the micro scale, similar to how Marika, as a Numen, required her other self Radagon to be whole, Hornsent is doing a similar thing, but on the macro scale. To become a saint, they have realized the Numen flesh needed to be conjoined with the vestiges of the Crucible. This is why we see two people being embraced by the spiral in Enir Ilim, as one of the people represents the Hornsent, the Crucible, the life, while the other, the Shamans, Numens, as death. The conjointment of this primordial duality will result in sainthood, which is precisely why the corpses making Enir Ilim do not have horns or long hair. They were not Hornsent or Shamans. They were both. The successful jar saints were hermaphrodites, not just male or female. This is why we see Marika and Radagon soreseals being represented on top of each other simultaneously. This was Hornsent's attempt to conjoin the moon and the sun to create the unalloyed gold. The Hornsent could only build a Tower of Divinity with the corpses of the hermaphrodite saints, not just Numens, Hornsents, random people, or inorganic material. Combining the qualities of male and female definitely reminds me of a certain unalloyed golden child. The lesser saints that had arisen in the jar experiments were all used as bricks of the tower, fueling its pillars and stairs, while the higher ones were used for another purpose. There was one exceptionally talented saint above all else. Her name was Marika, and she turned out absolutely perfect. Or so it seemed. Just like the other jar saints, Marika was also a failure, as the jar rituals that the Hornsent partook in, while strong in theory, was flawed in practice. The moon and the sun can't be conjoined that way. The sainthood can't be created by such inhumane brute force practices. As always, Marika was still the female part of the Rebirth, and somehow she was able to survive the jar rituals of the Hornsent. And seeing this unexpected result, the Hornsent was not impressed. Marika was not a hermaphrodite. She was not the saint that they were looking for. But before throwing Marika away like the rest of our people, something unexpected happened. Marika knew how much of a sticky situation she was in. She needed to do something, and fast. This was the moment her lover Radagon came to her aid. Radagon was the father of Messmer and the husband of Marika. She asked Radagon to replace her position temporarily with the intention of fooling Hornsent, making them believe that jar rituals were a success, trying to plant the idea that she was the saint that they were looking for. Radagon and Marika were the same person, but in two different bodies. If they can only create the illusion that they are the alchemical god of the Rebirth, Marika would be able to escape her fate of oblivion and death. After all, the Hornsent would adore Marika if they just saw Radagon. As Marika was already a very skilled shaman in spiritual matters, all Marika needed to do was to temporarily fool Hornsent by showing how the pointless jar rituals in the name of creating divinity actually bear fruit. That would be enough for the Hornsent to pool all of their hopes into Marika as their patron goddess, as the only success story of their jar experiments. To create the alchemical god of the Rebirth, Marika needed to be conjoined with her other self, Radagon, for her to be complete. Marika at this point in time was not yet a god. She was a shaman of Numen origin, and even though she had a loving husband, Radagon, and a child by the name of Messmer, their relationship was gonna take a turn real soon when Marika and Godfrey waged war against the fire giants. With his red locks, Radagon was a fire giant himself, symbolizing the Red King, sun, and the sulfur in the alchemical Rebirth. Seeing how Radagon's people of the fire giants opposes Marika directly by preventing the birth of the Erdtree, Radagon initially felt ashamed of his red locks, ashamed of his origins. Since Radagon loved Marika, but he also couldn't allow his people of the giants to be killed by Marika's troops. Exacting revenge on the Hornsent was one thing, but Radagon could not betray his own people. Unfortunately, Marika did not listen to Radagon and was determined to birth her Erdtree, glistening with life. The flame of the forge needed to be extinguished for the Erdtree to grow. Radagon and Marika's relationship was now at a crossroads. Marika was going to carve a leadership for herself as the patron goddess, and Radagon could not get behind that. Their relationship ended around this moment, as Marika had already found a worthy king consort named Godfrey to wage her wars. Just like Radagon, Godfrey seemingly embodied the gold and were just as strong if not stronger. Furthermore, her child Messmer was also by her side. After all they've gone through, Radagon certainly did not deserve this betrayal. Sometimes ambition blinds people to what really matters in life. But this is not the end of the story. Marika and Radagon's paths will reconverge once again in the future. Let's come back to the Hornsent. Basically, these jar experiments were a facade. They were merely a band-aid solution to create an alchemical rebirth in an artificial way. But the Hornsent, unaware of this truth, and in their obsession to create the spiral god to forge a new age, they've acted prematurely and put all of their eggs in one basket, so to speak. They have trusted Marika to deliver the promised age after her ascension at the gate of divinity. As in Hornsent's mind, at least on paper, Marika fit all the specifications to become their patron goddess. If only Marika too felt the same way. Certainly not after what Hornsent put her people through. In a tree in the outskirts of Bonny Village lies a gesture, O Mother, which, if you use it behind the Shadow Keep, there's a hidden door that leads to an abandoned yet peaceful village where the Shamans once lived. This was Marika's home. Only the kindness of gold without order. Marika bathed the village of her home in gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. After becoming a saint and exacting her revenge on the Hornsent, Marika cut loose her hair in her home in front of her late grandmother's statue. Her prayer was to create an epoch glistening with life and a world without death, without suffering, without pain. A braid of golden hair cut loose, Queen Marika's offering to the grandmother. What was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There is no one left to answer, and Marika never returned home again. Even if all her friends and family were sacrificed in Hornsent's jar rituals, she still bathed her village in gold with a minor Erdtree incantation to honor their memory before sealing the Shadow Realm once and for all with the birth of her Golden Order and the Erdtree. See, the betrayal of Marika, which the trailer alluded to, was towards the Hornsent. They were expecting Marika to ascend to divinity with the spiral, symbolizing both life and death. But Marika chose to embrace the former and ridding the world of the latter. Marika betrayed the Hornsent by extracting the rune of death from the laws of nature and birthing her golden order glistening with life. Hornsent thought that Marika was the most successful specimen of the Great Jar experiments, and she would be the patron goddess who was going to deliver on their spiritual aspirations. However, Marika decided to bolster one part of the spiral while rejecting the other. Both Messmer and Godfrey fought her wars in the name of her crusade. While Messmer impaled the dancing lions and burned the Hornsent, his, for lack of a better term, pet, BAYLE the Dread, faced the former Dragon Lord, Plesudisax, to weaken their stronghold. Meanwhile, Godfrey waged his wars on the Fire Giants to create an environment safe for the birth of an Erdtree by sealing the flames of the forge with Messmer's aid, paving the way for Marika's Erdtree, the same giant's forge that we summoned back its flames with Messmer's little sister, Melina, as she, much like his older brother, bore a vision of fire. Lastly, by Marika's orders, the Gate of Divinity was purely built by the Hornsent's corpses, as in Marika's eyes, this was divine retribution. She wanted to exact revenge on all of them who tortured, murdered, and degraded our people. But however justified Marika might feel in her mind, this was her original sin that was buried. The one thing that she could not embrace along with the rune of death. Take vengeance upon Messmer and his lot, they who betrayed us, they who burned us. and Marika was now seduced by an artificial epoch glistening with life. Marika rejected the spiral of divinity where life and death was conjoined, and instead she wanted to reject the concept of death. Marika did not want to experience the same trauma ever again. The same suffering and pain her Numen people, Shamans, experienced under the rule of the Hornsent was never going to be repeated ever again. No more death, no more suffering. In the Gate of Divinity, the Erdtree was birthed and supplied directly by the corpses of Hornsent she conquered with the help of Messmer and Godfrey. The Crucible represented life, and this was the perfect substance to create her Erdtree, glistening with life. This was the only way to exclusively focus on the life strand of the spiral. And for a while, Marika succeeded. The period of history that followed was the Age of Plenty. This was a blissful time that eventually came to an end. At this time, people were buried under the catacombs only to be reincarnated from the Erdtree's leaves. The concept of permanent death was history. In fact, Marika had gone a step further. She effectively turned the jars which was used to torture her people by the Hornsent into a force of good in the lands between. Living people were not stuffed into jars in our reign, but dead people, carried at the foot of the minor Erdtrees and the main one alike, to bury the remains of the corpses of the warriors for the reincarnation of the Erdtree to start its magic. In the Age of Plenty, even though the physical body could die, the soul of the dead could always be brought back to life after death, attaining a sort of immortality, which is most evident in how Radagon was revived from death in the Shadow Realm by Miquella. And this was done in a period of history where the Erdtree revivals were temporarily halted because Godwyn, with his Deathroot curse, was making the reincarnations of the Erdtree impossible. I hope you can also see the unabsorbed corpses at the catacombs. Basically, anything and everything that reminded Marika of the Hornsent was suppressed under the current regime, literally suppressed under the sewers in the capital. All the omens were gathered and locked up. Their horns were excised. The Crucible, which was once a signifier of divinity, was now a subject of pain for Marika. Her children, Mohg and Morgoth, was forced to live shackled underground just so that Marika would not be reminded of the pain that she was forced to endure every time she looked at their faces. It is so tragic that while trying to suppress the pain, Marika unintentionally started to inflict the same pain towards those baby omens, misbegottens, and even her 2 children who were Crucible touched at birth. Mohg and Morgoth did not deserve this, and even though Miquella did his best to contain the Crucible touched in his haven of Erdtree, trying to create a safe environment for them to peacefully coexist, the Erdtree project was merely a band-aid solution to a much deeper problem. The original sin that Marika wanted to bury needed to be embraced, and the Shadow Realm, which was suppressed in Marika's era, was going to be embraced by her unalloyed golden child, Miquella. To access the Shadow Realm, Miquella needed a very good plan. The very center of the lands between, all manners of death wash up here, only to be suppressed. Unlike her mother Marika, Miquella was ready to accept the whole of it, whether graceful or malign, for his age of compassion. If you look at the Hornsent, who has burn marks under his mask from Messmer's Crusade of Fire, he tells us of his hopes of Miquella's ascension to bring the retribution he always desired for his people.
Uphold his covenant, Miquella shall, and in godhood redeem our rueful clan. Then Marika and vilest Erdtree both will at last be from divinity wrenched, and surely contented I will be. But first, clear resounds the call of vengeance. The Impaler, Messmer, must pay his due. In vengeance for the flames, my blade I wield. How could I allow myself to forget? Revenge alone assures me peace of mind.
But this is a tale left for another time. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Making these videos take a lot of time, so if you want to see the next episode focusing on the ending of the DLC, give it a like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me your thoughts. Share it with a friend, as I really enjoyed making this video, and I hope you had a good time as well. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.